Congratulations to Randy and the entire team. This is phenomenal. I love that the NBA and all the elite athletes in the world are coming to Toronto to check out the whole tech scene. We're going to talk about how amazing it is and why we think you're in a super interesting time right now, that it's a great time to invest in Toronto and in Canada. I am super proud that Toronto's hosting it. You know, here in Canada, home of the NBA World Champion Toronto Raptors. It just doesn't get old saying that, I have to say. I have a special affection for basketball. When the Raptors first came to Toronto in 1995, I got season's tickets, and that was when they were playing in this place called the Sky Dome. The Sky Dome was a baseball stadium, this little itty bitty basketball court in the middle, but it was amazing. And not only that, but I got to sit up front and personal when Vince Carter and Allen Iverson went toe-to-toe in the playoffs in 2001. Any of you remember that? How many of you were alive at that point? Okay, that's good. Allen scored 54 points in one game, and then Vince came right back with 50, and sadly we lost at the finish line. But that was when you said, okay, you know what, Toronto's real on this basketball. A lot of people said, you know what, that was great, that was the Eastern Conference Finals, but you're not really the world-class team. They had doubts, they had skepticism, but the reality was, of course, 14 years later, we won the World Championships. And I think for those of you thinking about the tech market in Canada, that is a great point. Whatever preconceptions you had coming in, you should leave here knowing that we are world champions in technology as well. So that's part of the deal. In a very strange thing, I have another deeper, longer connection to basketball. Dr. James Naismith. Anybody know Dr. James Naismith? After you watch all of the ads and so on, the inventor of basketball is a distant relative of mine. From Almonte, Ontario. So if you ever get a chance and you're out really bored in the Ottawa Valley and you have nothing to do, go check out all the statues and the honorariums for Dr. James Naismith. He clearly did not pass on any of the genes. This body was not the basketball body, but nonetheless, the passion came. So, having said all that, Lawrence and I are here to talk about the Canadian dream and really all about technology in this country and why we think it's pretty amazing at this point in time. I think Ed Clark, Ed was the previous CEO of TD Bank. In the US, if you're from the US, TD, America's most convenient bank, very strong on the East Coast. He was the CEO of TD for many years, and he then became the chair and CEO of the Vector AI Institute. So we found that Canada had such a strong focus on AI, and the world didn't really know about it, so we wanted to amp it up and really accelerate it. And Ed was the chair and really the genesis behind the Vector Institute. His quote was, "The American dream isn't dead, it's just living in Canada." So I like that quote as a Canadian. But anyway, so here's the deal. The Canada you might not know, over 15,000 technology companies. One of the things that's critical to having a vibrant technology ecosystem is actually having a lot of talent. And we have one of the richest university programs across the country producing amazing tech talent. There's over 200,000 tech workers, and a lot of them are in the Toronto, Kitchener-Waterloo corridor, right where we are today, which is amazing. 17% of our GDP in Canada is driven on technology. So a very large percentage of our whole capability. Fourth largest and fastest growing tech market. And that's why you have organizations like Amazon. We came second in the Amazon HQ2 bid, and they were looking at Toronto and Kitchener-Waterloo as one of the other places. They ended up picking New York, and then that fell through a little bit. So still up for grabs, I think, if they get more serious about it. I went to the University of Waterloo down the road in Kitchener-Waterloo, and it's one of the top computer science and engineering schools in the country. And what's amazing, they started a co-op program back in 1960. And the co-op program was you go to school, you go work. You go to school, you go work. So when you finish school, you actually had 2 years of work experience behind you, which was amazing for the people, and you get better jobs and better students. What they also did that was very unique is they said, here's the deal. If you work on new technology, you build an app or you build some programs or algorithms while you're here, you as the student get to keep the IP. And that fundamentally changed why Kitchener-Waterloo and University of Waterloo is so pervasive in new technology. They've got unicorns and little companies that you might have heard of, like Dropbox, came out of University of Waterloo. Folks like OpenText came out of University of Waterloo. Little company that's gone through some interesting times, RIM/BlackBerry, University of Waterloo. So some pretty cool technologies companies coming out of that whole space. Interesting fact, Microsoft and Google hire the most engineers and computer scientists anywhere in the world from any school from University of Waterloo. So they come to Canada to make sure they're getting the best tech talent that they can. And that's why we see so many startups and scale-ups coming out through this whole space. So, and that's competing with MIT and competing with Stanford and all of those other universities that you might have heard of as well, right? So pretty cool, but we're shy Canadians, so we don't really brag about it that often. So I'm going to wave the flag a little bit today. So I want to hand it over to Lawrence to talk about his vision of the Canadian dream and what it means, especially as somebody who's helping drive technology here in Toronto. Lawrence, over to you.
Thank you very much. I'll just build on quickly on stats. Often there's always been a disposition in terms of how government is approaching this in terms of are we embracing that area. So first I'm going to talk about some macroeconomics, just some high-level stats. And then I'll bridge essentially how the City of Toronto from a public sector is looking to embrace that and be recognizing how much of this tech sector is really making a difference. Toronto's population, for example, grew by 77,000 last year. It's also been reported that over the next 10 years, there is an estimated 70,000 people that will be coming into the city. So if you look at that from a 2.9 million, we're the fourth largest city in North America, behind Mexico City, behind New York, behind LA, and then it's Toronto. And that's based because the ecosystem of diversity is second to none. A lot of organizations come here because our diversity and inclusion from a test bed and really looking at the market is phenomenal. Toronto is certainly on that roll. 74,400 of the jobs from the whole setup was in Toronto between June 2018 and May 2019. And that's about 40% of the 191,200 net new jobs in the whole of Ontario. That's coming within this particular sector. There are about 212 tall buildings under construction right now. There's a lot of booming construction businesses going in Toronto. And we're home to about 215,000 tech workers, which is making us the fourth largest tech employment hub in North America, and we're still growing. We're hosting so many conferences. I think there was something like Toronto brought in 147 million of tourism spend in the city in September over the course of the period of the year. And our film industry is really growing to a leap. And if you combine the growth of places like San Antonio, San Francisco, etc., we're really on that trajectory. So that's a great story. So for us as government, the question that comes from the City of Toronto is that we're based on four strategic priorities. We're having this great ecosystem, then how does our affordable housing, because it's expensive to live here, how are we grappling with housing in terms of we want to attract these groups, we want to ensure that our environment is created so that from an affordable housing. And I'm not talking about it from those in terms of from a social economic standpoint, those who are mid-income areas. How is our mobility in terms of the GTA of people transitioning through the city, coming from Waterloo, etc. How we build fiscal sustainment. Tax revenue is not the way necessarily. How are we looking at some ideas whereby from a revenue standpoint the city sort of goes through, and how are we ensuring that we're modernizing the tools? The younger generation don't want to necessarily come to City Hall to pay their bills, etc. So the private sector is an ecosystem that's huge. I'm going to give two initiatives. So a few of us got together to look at this huge expansion of artificial intelligence. Toronto is the bed of that. And we're looking at AI in terms of how we solve homelessness, in terms of where we're investing our capital funding. Over the course of a lot of the migration that has occurred with people coming from the south and the border, going to Quebec, etc., how are we building our housing? So if we get a certain investment, how do we know that where we build that housing is going to deal with the real cause of what is causing homelessness, for example? I think that's where the private sector can really help us. And I'll give an example how the federal government are doing it. So people go to war, they join the Department of National Defense, they go on the front lines, and they come back with PTSD. Well, through machine-to-machine learning, if we associated that Lawrence was never had the disposition to be on the front lines and should be more in behind the scenes, then really it's not a PTSD issue, it's really identify what is the right sorts of jobs that Lawrence should be looking at. So for homelessness, it's not necessarily a housing issue, it could be a mental health issue, it could be really a social economic issue. So some of those data points, we have terabytes of data, how are we using that? So that's a very key initiative. The second initiative is we're looking at blockchain in terms of the city goes through, it's the largest city in Canada, it's as big as a few provinces, we're a big organization, and it takes us 10 months to budget. So 10 out of 12, we finish budgeting and we're starting budgeting again. So we've got a new CFO who's really challenging us to say, I want to take the budgeting process in the city, this big budgeting process, down to 3 months, and we're looking at using blockchain to do a POC on that. And some people may say, well, how's that really solving some of the social and civic? Well, at the end of the day, if we're having a whole brief of resources that's focused on budgeting, how do we shift our resources to be dealing with the fact of these affordable housing, mobility, and all those areas? The private sector can really help us in that respect. So to say that there is a great market here, we as government are not sitting back. We're embracing all this technology, we're promoting it, we're supporting it. We need this ecosystem of the private sector to be engaged with us through private-public partnership. We can't do it ourselves all alone, but the tone of the city is very much with, we're looking to that as bringing the community together and how do we solve some of these issues, which also will lead into greater investment. So if you're looking to invest, this is certainly the place to be with some of those areas.
Yeah, that's excellent. And Lawrence, I'm super excited about a bunch of those initiatives you're doing. So you're being smart about how do you take advantage of new technology, but technology for good. And I would say that's part of what I would articulate as the Canadian dream. How do we leverage all of AI, Internet of Things, blockchain, cyber, but do it for the good of humanity? And so we spend a lot of time at Deloitte. I have a nice job, Chief Innovation Officer, so I help to think about how we do things internally with a 150-year-old company better. How do we help our clients innovate themselves and build sustainable value for their organizations? But also, and more importantly, how do we change the country? And so we had Kevin Lynch, who was a previous chair of the Privy Council in the government. He came to our partner group about 10 years ago, and he said, we're at the first time ever where if we don't change the productivity and innovation agenda in Canada, the next generation is going to have a worse quality of life than we do. And we took that very seriously, and we created a Future of Canada research program. Some of the reason I do all of these kind of talks is to help wake up both our country and our colleagues in the US and beyond around how to take advantage of technology, not just to make large corporations lots of money, but actually build a better society for us. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about ethics and values and how do you actually build diversity and inclusion. And I'm an engineer from Waterloo, so I like the technology. I'm a self-assessed technologist, but there are lots of challenging things that if we apply AI and we don't think about diversity and inclusion, we're going to build technology that brings the wrong kind of behavior. So for example, both Amazon and Google had issues with some of their recruiting where they build an engine and they said, okay, let's feed it all of the great engineers that we've got, all the people that are being successful at our company, we'll train it on that, and then we'll use it to do our recruiting screening. And so what happened? You had a bunch of white engineers that were in the database that ran the algorithm and said, oh, so what we need as a perfect candidate is a white engineer. Not so, as we all know. So that wasn't something evil that they did. They were just not aware of the unintended consequences if you don't think about ethics and values and diversity and inclusion. So what I love about Canada is we have an extremely diverse country. We focus deeply on this, and we've got values of looking after each other. And the goal that we have for the future of Canada is actually raising the lower and the middle class up and bringing them through, not just helping the upper class make more money and have better quality of life. So a combination of those factors. Lawrence, you mentioned that this is an unbelievably great time. Our federal government is investing deeply in Canada to continue to accelerate. So we put $1 billion into super clusters across the country. So clusters on AI, clusters on automated manufacturing, and how do we actually build additive and 3D printing into the mix. Clusters on digital healthcare, clusters on food processing and advanced food processing. So we're sprinkling that across the country, and Toronto is one of the recipients of that. What is interesting is if you look at investing, because the folks are here, you're thinking about where do you put your money, you want to be smart about it, you want to make sure that you get the best return. If you actually took a 500-person tech company, so good size, scale-up kind of tech company, and 75,000 square foot organization, you put them in the cheapest area in the US market, that'd be Rochester, New York, that organization would be about 36, 37 million to actually run that space. You do that same one in Ottawa, the most expensive location, and/or Toronto, the most expensive location, that's under 30 million. So you could save almost 20% by coming here dollar neutralized, right? So, just forget about taxes and everything else for the moment, just the actual cost of acquiring the talent, getting the space, running and operating, which means the organizations that you're going to invest in should be able to go a lot faster and grow a lot quicker. So that's exciting from my perspective. Talk to us a little bit more about some of the other initiatives that you're doing here in Toronto, Lawrence, because I think you're also leveraging local technology companies and you're testing, so government is actually becoming a smarter procurer of Canadian technology as well.
Without a shadow of a doubt. So the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Davila, who's a great person in terms of really looking at how we solve this, approached me about a year ago on the AI organization, and it was a local technology Canadian company. I'm a big supporter of ensuring that we facilitate an environment that our local small, mid-sized organizations have an opportunity to partner or have conversations with some of the bigger areas. So that organization, Sightline Innovation, was the company that did the POC. Sightline is a terrific Wally dream home. I'm a technical person, and we spend so much time whiteboarding and going back, but to see some of the work they're doing on data trust, to see some of the work they're really trying to put actually blockchain on top of machine learning, because government is the best use case for blockchain because it's built on a smart trust. It's a lot easier in the private sector. We're built to have to sort of trust to see that. So I was a big one of trying to say that how can we get those small organizations the voice they need in the city to at least experiment, and how do we go through that so that it's not just the big areas. So that's really good. On King Street West, we did a pilot, what we call the King Street pilot. It's public information, where we started looking at the movement of people on the streetcar. King Street West carries thousands of people every day. I used to live in Liberty Village, crunching that, and there's businesses there. So we went on a pilot to look at how many times can we save 5 or 7 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but that's a productivity in moving people back and forth. So that was a really, really good initiative. Toronto Water, for example, is doing so many great things with Internet of Things, IoT, etc., moving forward. And just recently, we're in conversations with the provincial government in how we come together. One of the big things in the city is that we're trying to move into a much more collaborative, centralized viewpoint as opposed to siloed across. The challenges and the things we need to solve. The particular resident who wakes up every day they don't need to know, I'm now joining this infrastructure that's the agency that goes into the city of Toronto, that's run by this group. So we're trying to work a lot closer to say, the data has no geography bound, how do we link together? But there are challenges that we face, and I would say that for really group of organizations, if you're really looking to come and solve some real areas within where government is how we're struggling through the modernization of our legislation and policy that talks about data. that talks about cybersecurity. So we just issued a managed services a contract that has gone out and closed now in how we outsource, because cybersecurity really is a big thing. And my job as the acting chief information officer is every day to make the public feel that there is a trust. And those we serve at the 44 divisions, the 33,000 people feel that there's trust. So cybersecurity is a really good piece for this space, for tech companies to really, there's great opportunities. The ability of really solving data trust, great opportunities. We don't have the answers. We're trying to really look at two laws. PIPEDA, which is the federal privacy law, is going through some modernization. MFIPA, which is the municipal law that talks about data, the movement of data. How do we solve that? Good opportunities if you're a tech company in Toronto wanting to make a difference. Hone in on those areas, you're going to get a lot of people who are going to want to partner. Creating partnership between the big organizations. They may have the account management and size, they don't have the IP that the Waterloo people have. That's a good opportunity. And there's a generation shift happening in the city. There are leaders now coming. I used to live in BC, just outside Vancouver. I joined the city in September 2017. We have veteran experienced people who've been in the city 20 years, they know the system. But also there's some new leaders coming in who are saying, yeah, we acted like this. It was good for that time. And I like to move away from a word of change because it speaks to, is there something wrong with it? I call it evolution management. That's how I say it to my team. We're evolving. The way we consume movies on streaming isn't the way for some of our generation that looked at VHS and Betamax. I'm giving a hint of my age group. Yeah, so it's the evolving. And I'll give a really good initiative. We have a focus in the city that 80% of our infrastructure will be on the cloud. Our election this year, the civic election, if you went online, was actually hosted in the cloud. In 4 years, the infrastructure will be pushing to the cloud.
And the Russians weren't actually involved in it, right?
Well, if they were, then our cybersecurity was pushing them back. But the reason we're trying to do that is agility and scale. We don't want to have everything on premise. We need to move fast. So those are some of the flavors of things that we're doing.
So I think what's awesome, if you're investing in companies in Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal, et cetera, in Canada, our municipal governments are leveraging those technologies. Our provincial governments are trying to leverage those technologies. Federal government's trying, but they're only doing it when it is actually the best technology. So, and that's why this actually works. I want to tell two quick stories, and then if there's a question or two, and I think we may be at time. So this stuff is moving so fast. As Chief Innovation Officer last year, I went to our board, and I have to drive a couple $100 million of incremental revenue every year to our business in Canada. And I went and I presented all the things that we did and what we were doing with our brand and how we're taking it out to the market. And they said, Terry, what are you worried about? And I said, well, I don't think we have I don't think we have our shit together, actually. Excuse me if we're taping and recording, but I don't think we have our act together on AI. We need to get much more robust about it. So we built our AI practice about a year and a half ago. We have 400 people in our AI business in Toronto and Montreal, and that's a $100 million business for us a year later. And that's because of the level of talent. And we've got Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, who's the chief data scientist for Google, lives in Toronto. He's taught most of the global leaders of AI. So that's the kind of capability that we have here. We're number one in things like cyber, number one in things like blockchain. Vitalik Buterin, one of the creators of Ethereum, from Toronto. Right? So there's a lot of depth here. One of the things that you don't know about Canada, and particularly Toronto, Kitchener-Waterloo, is neuroscience. Neuroscience is massive here. There's 800 neuroscientists in the Toronto Kitchener-Waterloo corridor that are building cool neuroscience capabilities. There's actually a great company, Health Tech Connects, with their NeuroCatch offering. They're from Vancouver, but they're out in the tech lab. There's some amazing companies, by the way. Make sure that you go and talk to the companies that are out there, because they're pushing the edge. NeuroCatch, I'm excited about. When you go to the doctor, what do? You get your blood pressure taken, right? Because you want to worry about how your heart's doing and is it okay. What the guys at NeuroCatch have done is they've figured out how to put an EEG on your head and take 6 minutes of a quick little set of questions, loud to you, like word association, like car and building, or car and giraffe. Car and giraffe, what's that all about? Triggers complex processing in your brain. In 6 minutes, they can figure out all the brain waves and how healthy your brain is. So why aren't we going to the doctor and actually having our brains tested? So That's the kind of technology that's getting developed here in Canada. Just a super personal story, and I will drift into a minor advertorial. Somebody told me this morning I looked a little bit like a walking billboard, but Canadians get very passionate about our society and helping each other and raising each other up. And Lawrence talked about the homeless and a number of things that we're doing. Mental health is one that's personally very focused for me. I've got a friend whose son committed suicide in third year university. I had a moment where my daughter actually wrote a suicide note and didn't go through with it. And I dug deep into it and said, I gotta go fix this and think about what we can do. And I started to look at the relationship between music and mental health. And so why are we prescribing antidepressants and not actually prescribing music therapy? Why is that? Everybody knows. Anybody going to music festival this weekend? Like anybody listening to music today? Like everybody knows that music helps and it heals you, right? But yet we only prescribe. And the reason that that happens is because we actually don't have clinical evidence that music therapy changes your brain chemistry. So we created something, a not-for-profit this year called the Awesome Music Project. There are shirts and t-shirts available later for those who may want to talk about it. We've created a book with 111 stories about songs that make people happy. We have every province, every territory represented. We have an 8-year-old and a 95-year-old. We have famous people like Sarah McLachlan, and Canadians will know Rick Mercer, Alan Doyle from Great Big Sea, David Johnson was our Governor General, Theo Fleury, Jordan Eberle, lots of famous people, and a lot of just normal, super awesome people that are truck drivers and farmers and people that work in retail shops. The goal of the book is actually to raise a little bit of awareness on music and mental health. But what's super cool is everybody we talked to said, you know, you guys are onto something here. You need to get more serious about this. So we created the not-for-profit and we're doing a concert series. I loop back to how fast technology is changing. There is a segue in a hook here. The book is amazing. I've got the printer's proofs if anybody wants to see the physical layer of the book. Super excited about it. And what we're gonna do is create an augmented reality version of the book. So anybody use HoloLens or any of the augmented reality kind of capabilities? So you're gonna have the book, we got a 5-minute warning back there. You're gonna have the book and you can take our app, you can hold it over Sarah's story and Sarah will pop up and sing or tell you her story, or Rick Mercer or whoever. So we're leveraging technology to actually expand the reading experience, and all of the work is going toward mental health research, music and mental health research to clinically assess the situation. What is wicked is the guy, it happens to be a guy in this instance, that's gonna build the app for us, the augmented reality app. I looked for the best of the best. The guy, and I say guy, I should say kid, who's gonna build it is 14. He's 14. You say, 14, how can he have the right skills to do this? He's built 18 augmented reality apps already. He's been out in Redmond working with Microsoft on HoloLens, and he's getting trained by an amazing group here called the Knowledge Society that's helping turbocharge high school students. So all of that to say, that's the kind of talent that is in our backyard and is serving us. I'm super glad that I'm not graduating now because I don't think I could code or get a job in some of these things, but that's the kind of capability we've got.